New Zealand has a rich and fascinating history that spans thousands of years. The first people to settle in New Zealand were the Maori, who arrived on the islands around 1,000 years ago. They developed a rich culture and tradition, which is still evident in New Zealand today. The first European to discover New Zealand was Dutch navigator Abel Tasman in 1642, but it was British navigator James Cook who made the first detailed maps of the islands in the late 1700s. British settlers began to arrive in the early 1800s, and by 1840 the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between Maori chiefs and the British Crown, establishing British sovereignty over the islands. In the late 1800s, New Zealand became a self-governing colony, and in 1907 it became a dominion within the British Empire. New Zealand played a significant role in World War I, and its soldiers fought alongside Australian troops at Gallipoli in 1915. In the 20th century, New Zealand underwent significant social and political change. In 1893, it became the first country in the world to grant women the right to vote, and in the 1980s it underwent significant economic reform, moving from a heavily protected, state-controlled economy to a more market-oriented one. Today, New Zealand is a modern and prosperous country, known for its stunning natural landscapes, friendly people, and strong economy. The Maori culture and traditions remain an important part of the country's identity, and efforts are being made to promote greater understanding and respect for this culture among all New Zealanders. New Zealand is an island nation located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. The history of New Zealand can be traced back to the arrival of the Polynesians, who settled in the islands over 1,000 years ago. The first known European contact with New Zealand was made by the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman in 1642, but it was not until the late 18th century that Europeans began to establish a presence in the country. The first significant European presence in New Zealand came with the arrival of the British navigator Captain James Cook, who charted the islands in 1769 and claimed them for Britain. In 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and Maori chiefs, which established British sovereignty over the islands and granted Maori people equal rights with British citizens. During the 19th century, New Zealand developed into a prosperous agricultural economy, with wool and dairy exports becoming major industries. The country became self-governing in 1852, and in 1907 it became a dominion within the British Empire. New Zealand fought alongside Britain in both World War I and World War II, and in 1947 it became a founding member of the Commonwealth. During the 20th century, New Zealand underwent significant social and political changes. In 1893, it became the first country in the world to grant women the right to vote. In the 1970s and 1980s, the country underwent economic reforms that saw it become one of the most free market-oriented economies in the world. In 1984, the Labour government began a program of deregulation and privatization, which led to significant changes in the economy. Today, New Zealand is a modern, prosperous nation with a diverse economy and a multicultural society. It is known for its stunning natural scenery, including mountains, forests, and beaches, and for its unique Maori culture, which continues to play an important role in the country's national identity. New Zealand is a country located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, comprising two main islands, North Island and South Island, and numerous smaller islands. The history of New Zealand dates back to the arrival of the first Polynesian settlers known as the Maori, who arrived in New Zealand more than 1,000 years ago. Maori history. The Maori arrived in New Zealand from eastern Polynesia, between 1250 and 1300 AD. They were skilled navigators and used celestial navigation to find their way across the Pacific Ocean. They initially settled on the coast and developed a distinctive culture, with their own language, mythology, and traditions. The Maori were skilled hunters, gatherers, and farmers, and developed a unique relationship with the land. They believed that the land was sacred, and that their ancestors were buried in the soil. They developed a complex social and political system, with tribal chiefs, rangataira, who controlled land, resources, and people. European colonization. In 1642, the Dutch navigator Abel Tasman became the first European to reach New Zealand. However, it was not until 1769 that the British navigator James Cook arrived in New Zealand and claimed it for Britain. The British established a penal colony in Australia in 1788, and New Zealand became a popular destination for whaling and sealing ships. In 1840, the British Crown signed the Treaty of Waitangi with the Maori chiefs, which recognized Maori ownership of their lands and gave the British the right to govern the country. However, there were significant differences in interpretation between the Maori and British versions of the treaty, leading to ongoing conflicts and disputes. New Zealand became a self-governing colony in 1852, and gradually developed into a prosperous agricultural and industrial society. However, tensions remained between the Maori and the British settlers, with conflicts over land ownership and cultural differences. Modern history. In the 20th century, New Zealand became increasingly independent from Britain, and in 1947 became a fully independent country within the British Commonwealth. New Zealand played a significant role in both World War I and II, and also played an important role in the formation of the United Nations. In the 1980s and 1990s, New Zealand underwent significant economic and social reforms, which transformed the country into a modern, free market economy. Today, New Zealand is a prosperous and multicultural country, with a diverse economy and a vibrant culture that reflects its Maori and European heritage. The history of New Zealand dates back to the arrival of Polynesians in the region around 1250 to 1300 AD. These early settlers established a distinct Maori culture and way of life, which thrived until the arrival of European explorers and settlers in the 18th century. In 1642, Dutch explorer Abel Tasman became the first European to sight New Zealand, but it wasn't until the late 18th century that British explorer James Cook made several visits to the country and claimed it for Britain in 1840 through the Treaty of Waitangi. The Treaty of Waitangi established British sovereignty over New Zealand, while also recognizing the rights of the Maori people. However, tensions soon arose between the two cultures, as the British colonizers imposed their own laws and customs on the Maori, often with little regard for their traditional way of life. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, New Zealand became a self-governing colony within the British Empire, with a democratic government and a strong economy based on agriculture and industry. The country also played a significant role in World War I and II, sending troops to fight alongside Britain and other Allied powers. In the second half of the 20th century, New Zealand underwent significant social and cultural changes, including the recognition of the Maori as an official language, the legalization of homosexuality, and the establishment of a comprehensive welfare state. Today, New Zealand is a prosperous and modern country with a diverse and multicultural population. The country is known for its stunning natural beauty, progressive social policies, and its contributions to science, technology, and the arts. New Zealand is an island country located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. The earliest inhabitants of New Zealand were the indigenous Maori people who arrived on the islands around 1,000 years ago. The Maori established a thriving culture based on hunting, fishing, and agriculture. In the late 18th century, European explorers, led by the British navigator James Cook, arrived in New Zealand. In 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and Maori chiefs, establishing British sovereignty over New Zealand. However, the treaty also recognized Maori rights to their lands and resources. The 19th century saw rapid European settlement in New Zealand, with the economy based on farming and mining. The discovery of gold in the mid-1800s brought a rush of immigrants, including Chinese miners. In 1893, New Zealand became the first country in the world to grant women the right to vote. New Zealand's involvement in World War I and II cemented its ties to the British Empire, but the country also began to assert its own identity in the post-war era. In 1975, the Waitangi Tribunal was established to address Maori grievances related to the Treaty of Waitangi. New Zealand has undergone significant social and economic changes in recent decades. In 1984, the Labour government implemented a series of free market reforms that dramatically altered the country's economy. The 1990s saw a significant increase in immigration, particularly from Asia, and the country has become increasingly diverse as a result. Today, New Zealand is a democratic, developed country with a high standard of living. The government is committed to environmental sustainability and has set ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The country is also known for its stunning natural beauty, with many tourists visiting each year to explore its mountains, beaches, and forests. New Zealand is a sovereign island country in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. The history of New Zealand begins with the arrival of the Polynesians around 1200 to 1300 AD. They are known as the Maori people, and they developed a unique culture, language, and customs in New Zealand. In 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and the Maori chiefs, which granted British sovereignty over New Zealand while recognizing the rights of the Maori people. However, the treaty was not fully respected by the British colonizers, and there were many conflicts and land wars between the Maori and the settlers. In 1907, New Zealand became a self-governing dominion within the British Empire. It gained full independence in 1947, but it still maintained close ties to Britain and the Commonwealth. During the 20th century, New Zealand developed a strong welfare state, and it became known for its progressive social policies, such as women's suffrage, social welfare, and nuclear-free policies. New Zealand played an important role in both World War I and World War II as a member of the British Empire. In recent years, New Zealand has become a prosperous and developed country, with a high standard of living and a diverse economy. It is also known for its natural beauty, and it is a popular destination for tourists. Today, New Zealand is a parliamentary democracy and a member of the United Nations, the Commonwealth, and the Pacific Islands Forum. New Zealand is a country located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. The earliest inhabitants of New Zealand, the Maori people, arrived in the country around 1,000 years ago from Polynesia. They developed a unique culture and language, which are still a significant part of New Zealand's identity today. The first European to visit New Zealand was Dutch explorer Abel Tasman in 1642. However, it was not until 1769 that the British navigator James Cook mapped the coastline and claimed the country for Britain. In the following years, British colonists began to settle in New Zealand, and in 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and Maori chiefs, establishing British sovereignty over the country. During the 19th century, New Zealand underwent significant social, political, and economic changes. The gold rush of the 1860s brought a wave of immigration to the country, and in 1893, New Zealand became the first country in the world to grant women the right to vote. In the early 20th century, New Zealand played an active role in World War I and II, and its troops fought alongside British and other Allied forces. After the wars, the country experienced a period of economic growth, with the government implementing various social reforms and infrastructure projects. During the latter half of the 20th century, New Zealand underwent significant cultural and social changes. The Maori cultural revival gained momentum, and the government made efforts to recognize and preserve Maori language and culture. In 1975, the Waitangi Tribunal was established to hear claims of Treaty of Waitangi breaches and provide redress. Today, New Zealand is a prosperous and multicultural country, known for its stunning natural beauty, progressive social policies, and thriving tourism industry. The country's economy.
I-click ang notification bell, like, share and subscribe. Salamat sa panonood.